David, by God's direction, goes up to Hebron, where he is made king over the tribe of Judah. Abner, the captain of Saul's army, makes Saul's son Ishbosheth the king over the other 11 tribes of Israel. And we have a civil war. Verse 1. In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" he asked. The Lord said, "Go up." And David asked, "Where shall I go?" "To Hebron," the Lord answered. After this refers to the time after the deaths of Saul and Jonathan and the period of mourning for them. Now that Saul is out of the picture, David wants to know what to do. And he asks the Lord, "Shall I go up?" Why did he ask that question? He is in Philistine country, Saul is dead, and David is to be the next king. What should this next move be? He waited until he received his instructions from the Lord. David by now had learned quite clearly that he must wait on the Lord for direction. God told him to go up to Hebron. Hebron is located in the south of the land, not far from the Philistine border. God is telling him to move cautiously. He is not to go up and arbitrarily take over Israel, but to move up into the land to make himself available. Verse 2. So David went up there with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. When David headed for Hebron, he took with him the 2 women who were his wives at this time. Perhaps you're asking, does God approve of a man having 2 wives? No, obviously no. This matter will cause David a great deal of trouble later on. Verse 3 now. David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. David's loyal followers came with him and settled their families in the cities of Hebron. Verse 4. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. Now that David has made himself available, the men of his own tribe come and anoint him king over Judah. Verse 5. He sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead to say to them, "The Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Saul, your master, by burying him." David does a very wise thing. The men who buried Saul were devoted to him, and now David thanks them for it. David has a great respect for the anointed of the Lord. He had 2 opportunities to kill him and make himself king, but he did not do it. David's good points are often passed over because his sin seems to obscure them. It's like a cloud that covers the sky and shuts out the sunshine of his life. In many respects, David was a wonderful man. Afterward, he paid for his sin every day of his life. However, here, right now, David complimented the men of Jabesh Gilead. Verses 6 and 7. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and brave, for Saul your master is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. He asked for their support and devotion to him as king, even as they had given it to Saul. Notice he is moving in a very diplomatic and commendable manner at this time. We should recognize the fact that both Saul and Jonathan had sons, and one of them would have been the normal one to come to the throne had not God intervened. Abner, who had been captain of Saul's hosts, moves immediately to make one of them king. Notice what he did. Verses 8 and 9 of 2 Samuel chapter 2. Meanwhile, Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, and Jezreel, and also over Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Here is the beginning of the division of the kingdom which will come after the reign of Solomon when Jeroboam leads a rebellion. This is the first fracture. At first, David is made king over the southern region, that is Judah, but the northern tribes make Ishbosheth, a son of Saul, their king. Verses 10 and 11. Ishbosheth, son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. The house of Judah, however, followed David. The length of time David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. There is an interval of civil war between the northern kingdom and David's kingdom, Judah in the south. It depleted the resources and energy of the nation. It was indeed a very tragic thing. Verses 12 and 13. Abner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Joab, son of Zeruiah, and David's men went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat down on one side of the pool and one group on the other side. Abner and Joab were attempting to negotiate a solution to prevent a civil war. Now let's read on, verses 14 to 16. Then Abner said to Joab, "Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us." "All right, let them do it," Joab said. So they stood up and were counted off. 12 men for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 for David. Then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his dagger into his opponent's side, and they fell down together. So that place in Gibeon was called Helkath Hazurim. Abner said, "Let the young men come together in battle." Joab agreed, and this was the way they were planning to settle the issue. Verse 17 says, "The battle that day was very fierce, and Abner and the men of Israel were defeated by David's men." David is a veteran of many campaigns by now. He is not the innocent little shepherd we had met at first. He has now spent time hiding in the caves and dens of the earth, and he has collected men of war around him. He is rugged, tough, and strong for this type of warfare. So his men are able to win a victory over Abner and his host, an army of superior numbers. Now I want to call your attention to something that took place, which will play a prominent part later on. Abner was followed by Asahel. Asahel was a brother of Joab, who was David's captain. Abner was Saul's captain. Let's read from verse 18. The 3 sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel was as fleet-footed as a wild gazelle. He chased Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he pursued him. Abner looked behind him and asked, "Is that you, Asahel?" "It is," he answered. Zeruiah, by the way, was a sister of David, and she had these 3 outstanding sons, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. We now know that Asahel was taking after Abner, and he is not a match for him at all, and Abner warns him. Verse 21, Then Abner said to him, "Turn aside to the right or to the left. Take on one of the young men and strip him of his weapons." But Asahel would not stop chasing him. You see, he was the fleet-footed gazelle, but not so much of a warrior. Again Abner warned Asahel, this is verse 22, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face?" But Asahel refused to give up the pursuit. So Abner thrust the butt of his spear into Asahel's stomach, and the spear came out through his back. He fell there and died on the spot, and every man stopped when he came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died. Abner warned him to stop his pursuit. Asahel refused, and finally Abner turned around and drove a spear through him. Abner killed the brother of Joab. That means that in Joab's heart there will be bitterness, hatred, and the desire to get revenge. This revenge will come later, as we shall see. Asahel's funeral closes this chapter. After the funeral, Joab and his men went all night and came to Hebron at the break of day. They reported to David all that had taken place. Now chapter 3. Chapter 3 continues the account of the long civil war that weakened the nation. Gradually, David gained in strength. Abner, after falling out with Ishbosheth, deserted to David. Abner would have been a threat to Joab, David's captain, and moreover, he wanted to seek revenge for his brother's death, Asahel's death. Therefore, Joab later on murders Abner. Now let's read on. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. The condition of the land is one of internal strife. There is civil war. The nation's energies are being depleted and their resources are being exhausted. David has been in Hebron for 7.5 years. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel. The second, Chileab, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And the sixth, Ithream, the son of David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. You can see that David had more than 2 wives. He had others, and this will cause a great problem for David. God did not approve, and David did not get by with this. Among the list of David's sons is one by the name of Absalom. I am sure you are familiar with his story. Later on, we will see him lead a rebellion against David. This is the son that David apparently wanted to follow him as king, but he was brutally killed by Joab in battle. It broke David's heart when he was slain. Who is the mother of Absalom? Maacah, who was the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. Who was the king of Geshur? If you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 27 verse 8, you will find that David and his men invaded the Geshurites and the Gezerites and the Amalekites. I believe David was wrong in doing this. He slew these people, including the king of Geshur, and apparently took his daughter captive. She eventually became his wife. They had a son, and it was this young man who led the rebellion against David. My friend, God saw to it that David did not get away with his sin. It is important for us to note this. This chapter tells us about a long period of civil war that in many ways is uninteresting as far as you and I are concerned. Abner, who had been the chief captain of Saul's army, had pushed Ishbosheth, Saul's son, onto the throne. Being an older man who had such a high position, he was not apt to listen to this young king, who was probably totally inexperienced. He did something he should not have done. Verses 7 to 8. Now Saul had a concubine named Rizbah, daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" Abner was very angry because of what Ishbosheth said, and he answered, "Am I a dog's head on Judah's side? This very day I am loyal to the house of your father Saul and to his family and friends. I haven't handed you over to David, yet now you accuse me of an offense involving this woman." It was the exclusive right of the man who was the successor to the throne to cohabit with the deceased king's concubines. Abner infringed on the rights of Ishbosheth and became angry when the king rebuked him for taking Rizpah, one of Saul's concubines, into his own home. Candidly, the young king was justified in rebuking Abner, but Abner became so angry and he immediately began to make overtures to David. May God deal with Abner, be it ever so severely, if I do not do for David what the Lord promised him on oath, and transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and establish David's throne over Israel and Judah from Dan to Beersheba. Ishbosheth did not dare to say another word to Abner because he was afraid of him. In other words, Abner made known his intention of abandoning the house of Saul and allying himself with David. He was going to help David become king over the 12 tribes. Now Ishbosheth did not say a word to Abner. He was the son of Saul, but he had no army and no training whatsoever. He was not a warrior like his brother Jonathan. He had been brought up in the king's palace, and he feared Abner. Abner, remember, would have been an older man. This is verse 12. Then Abner sent messengers on his behalf to say to David, "Whose land is it? Make an agreement with me, and I will help you bring all Israel over to you." "Good," said David, "I will make an agreement with you, but I demand one thing of you. Do not come into my presence unless you bring Michal, daughter of Saul, when you come to see me." David told Abner he could come only if he brought Saul's daughter Michal with him. You remember that Michal was David's first wife. Saul had taken her away from David. Believe me, David had a career which was up and down, and this is the reason he suffered. He let sin enter his life a number of times, but above all, it was a faith in God that never failed. He wanted more than all else to have a wonderful relationship with God. Verse 14, Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, demanding, "Give me my wife Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for the price of 100 Philistine foreskins." So Ishbosheth gave orders and had her taken away from her husband Paltiel, son of Laish. Her husband, however, went with her, weeping behind her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go back home." So he went back. Abner's overture was accepted by David, but if you noted, David approaches Ishbosheth directly and asks him to send Michal over. Abner plays a mediatory role, and he brings the house of Saul with the house of David. And then in verse 21 we read, "Then Abner sent to David, 'Let me go at once and assemble all Israel for my lord the king, so that they may make a compact with you, and that you may rule over all that your heart desires.' So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace." So here we can note that David had actually approved of Abner's act of mediation and also encouraged him to do what he was supposed to do. Let's read on and find out what actually happens to Abner. All of this time, if you remember, Joab has not forgotten that Abner had killed his brother. Now let's skip to verse 27. "Now when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the gateway as though to speak with him privately, and there to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach and he died." So Joab avenged his brother's death. When David heard that Joab had murdered Abner, he did not approve it. In fact, he accused Joab of doing a very terrible thing. Concerning Abner's death, he said a very interesting thing. Verse 33, the king sang this lament for Abner. Should Abner have died as the lawless die? Verse 34, your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered, you fell as one falls before wicked men. And all the people wept over him again. Why did David say that? It certainly is a strange epitaph to give a person. Abner was in Hebron. Now, if you would recall, Hebron was one of the cities of refuge where a murderer was safe. In that city, Joab could not have touched him. But Joab quietly, slyly took Abner aside and said to him, come out here. I want to talk with you. You are the captain on one side and I am the captain on the other. It would be nice if we could get together. So Abner stepped outside the city of refuge and he got killed by Joab. That is why David said, Abner died as a fool dies. Isn't that a message for us today? There is a refuge for every sinner in Christ. Regardless of how high a man's IQ is or what his position in life might be, if he is outside the place of refuge, he is lost. Dear friend, are you resting in Christ? Is Christ your refuge?